Welcome to the weekly Sizzle. We're here so that you can learn all the franchise news and watch it in a video versus having to read below. That's the lazy way out of reading our magazine. So clearly there's three of us right now, and we wanted Eric to be a part of the beginning of this because Eric came up with the genius idea to fool everybody on the site yesterday with a story about Congress deciding to take half of the franchise fee from franchisors in states that they award franchises in. So Eric, what was your inspiration for this?
Two things. One, it seems like every other day there's a new news story about the franchise industry somehow coming under fire from political forces, regardless of whether it's the federal government, state governments, or just people in general. Two, Starbucks kind of already did the job for me with the Race Together campaign, so I couldn't exactly pull that one out because that actually turned out to be true. So it seemed like this was believable, but also over the top.
All right, Sean, what was your first take on the story yesterday?
I think it was just like great satire. It was close enough to the truth that it was for a half a second, it sucked you in, and then as you read through it, and then I loved the names of the politicians. I think that kind of added to it.
Yeah, those names of the politicians were great, except for those who on Facebook, who will remain nameless at the moment, who went off and now ripped those two fake congressmen. There's no one named Jock Strap in Congress currently. So shame on you for believing it. Could Fox News have posted something like that? Perhaps. But Eric, job well done, and all of you who somewhat believe that, I get it that it could be somewhat true, but it was false. And we're actually going to kick Eric out of the Weekly Sizzle now because he's got to go work on the 30,000 readers that want more information. So see you, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, so continuing on, Sean, I want to talk about low-cost franchises. We continue to write about this as a category that continues to perform well. There are brands like Gym Guys that would be home-based, where it's out of a van and you're doing personal training, and then up to senior care and service brands that can operate out of the house. Do you see, as the economy is continuing to improve, that low-cost franchises still perform as well as they have, or does the middle-ish franchise brands start taking a little bit more bandwidth as people are able to secure more financing?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the type of candidates and the capital that they have. You're always going to have different ranges, so you're going to have people with a lot of capital that are going to be heavier hitters with bigger brands and bigger investments. But then you're also going to have those people that are kind of new entry into franchising, where a home-based, low investment is a good start or a good opportunity for them that just don't have the capital, or some people just don't have the risk-taking. They don't want to take that risk,
sure.
So they want to do something a little bit safer and go for a lower investment. Having a home-based business, obviously you don't take the expenditures of an office and other type of, or restaurant or build-to-suit type of situations.
Well, it's interesting. So the commercial cleaning franchises or the residential cleaning franchises, they've carved out this niche where they sell a master agreement. So that's a larger investment. And then they'll bring in the unit franchisees who can come in at a much lower investment point. Do you see this capturing a new sort of growth trend with, say, not a food brand, it's going to stay specific to service, but could this happen where masters start having a rebound in a broader sense of franchising?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that's really unique, which I think is kind of, you're starting to see a trend, like say, in the janitorial industry space, that the lower investment ranges type franchises make more sense from a master perspective, just because of the fact of the relationship building, being connected in the community and the face-to-face that type of sales process would require, makes it harder for larger brands to be able to do that. Using a master program where you have people in the community that the candidates can go to the office and talk to somebody about it, I think helps in that awarding process. So in many of those types of franchise systems, that type of model can make a lot of sense.
Sure. So another story that we've been covering heavily this month is, and will continue to cover heavier into this month, is that of the multi-unit operator. You'll see this as a topic in many of my columns this month, that it's this category of franchisee that everyone goes after. We feature Robert Branca, who is the chairperson of the multi-unit conference, which happens next week. But this multi-unit franchisee, the traction's so high, but the reality is there's very few that will actually bite. Do you see it now shifting back to the next multi-unit franchisee being the hot category, as in the single unit guy that comes to the table that is growth minded?
Yeah, it's funny. The multi-unit franchise candidate is like the white whale for every franchisor. It's like, well, we can solve all of our development issues if we just get a couple of those guys and they just own a complete market area and state. Those guys are hard to find and they're hard to come by. Every brand is out there trying to, solicit them. So I do think that the brands that are focusing on maybe entry-level multi-unit potential type candidates can see really good growth. So they may be a 1 or 2 unit person, but they can slowly develop into a larger multi-unit franchisee. Now you've got a good track record with several franchisees that now may have, say, 5 to 10 units, and then you become very attracted to the bigger white whales of the franchising industry, which is the big multi-unit operators.
Sure. So another story that we've discussed over the last few weeks is franchise regulations. There's a gap in franchising that exists in that government and politicians don't really understand franchising. Franchisees think that franchising at the very beginning is McDonald's and gas stations. Franchisors don't make it as easy for franchisees to understand apples to apples, in that an item 19 can have variance that franchise X says top 25%, franchise Y says 100%. So that therefore creates variation in item 19. So it makes it very challenging for the franchisee to succeed. The stories that we've written about on franchise regulations is perhaps we should have more regulations or tighter regulations for becoming a certified franchise executive, which both of us are, but perhaps it's harder to get into this elite group like a doctor. Maybe that's a little bit too far-fetched, but maybe a CPA, that there needs to be stronger testing to give you that designation as CFE. That franchisors need to be regulated a little bit harder, maybe by the governing body of franchising, that IFA gives you a stamp that says you are an approved investment. Then franchisees, it's interesting, if you look back, or if I look back at the last 10 years, almost every franchisee that I've seen come through, if they would have come to the table just perfectly financially qualified, nothing else mattered. That, yeah, the franchisor ideally wants the check. So with a lack of education and this question of whether or not we should have tougher regulations, do you feel that tougher regulations and more education would make for a stronger franchise industry, and that franchisors would be stronger, franchisees would be stronger, and politicians would actually get it?
My first reaction to more regulation is I don't like that aspect, especially from government regulations. I think you have a great idea, the fact that if the IFA came out with some type of certification for brands that says this franchisor's FDD and this brand meets these requirements and has a gold seal, I think that would be fantastic. Government regulation, I just think there's too many inconsistencies between the states and even within the states, depending on which regulator you get that reviews your FDD and their opinion of your FDD. So I think that aspect of it would be fantastic in franchising. I think sometimes having regulations in place that are for franchising gives people a false sense of security that because the state reviewed it means it's good. They still need to do their due diligence. It's just a document that just gives a snapshot of the opportunity. So it's still buyer beware, do your due diligence, and go forward from there. The second part is the education. Most people do not understand what franchising is. They lump it into a certain category when the majority of franchising is small business owners, mid-sized franchise systems. And so having regulations that may make sense that affect large brands like a McDonald's has dramatic impact on smaller type franchise systems.
Yeah, and it's obviously our job as a publication to give you, the franchisee, and you, the franchisor, and you, the supplier, or you, the governing body, as much education as possible, and we're going to continue to work on that. Lastly, a story that went up today, or yesterday, is my column about marketing, in that marketing is really the issue for franchisors, not leads. Almost every lead or every franchisor that we've worked with has said, get me more leads. And I get it. If at our agency or at 1851, if we were able to talk to a wider bucket of leads, then maybe we're going to grow a little bit faster. However, I don't think lead generation is the issue franchisors face today. I think it's marketing. I don't think they understand who their prospect is. They'll say that it's someone who's qualified and passionate and has some money, he wants to open up in the territory we have available. But I don't think that's it. I think it's really brands understanding what is their points of differentiation, highlighting the people that help them tell those stories, and then really attracting or going after that specific needle. That if they know that a husband-wife team are going to create their most successful franchisee, then that's what they focus on. So you've seen it. You've been on the franchisor side. You're on the supplier side now. Is marketing the issue or is lead generation the issue?
It's definitely marketing, and I think what sells franchises is telling a story, and a franchisor needs to be able to tell that story and articulate it to the candidate, and then by having those stories and the marketing, the messaging, it will then lead to a higher quality of candidates that are coming in, because then you apply those storytelling, the marketing, the content, all that stuff coming together will help lead to higher awareness, which leads to more lead generation. Focusing just on lead generation first, I always talk about franchise development is a bucket, and if your bucket's leaky, you can pour all the water into it, and the water just kind of funnels right out. So focusing just on lead generation and not the bucket itself you're just wasting a lot of resources and time and energy. So ensuring that I look at the marketing aspect of it and the positioning as that bucket.
I think that example is great. I think that roles and responsibilities of a development team is even more critical, because franchise development team X is going to say, hey, marketing agency, you didn't give me enough leads. I didn't sign enough deals. Well, the reality is, what is the role of that marketing agency? It's to try to drive more awareness that will then get more people to your website, who will then make the decision whether or not they want to inquire about owning your franchise. And then it's up to the franchise system to process that lead. It's not up to a marketing agency. However, I think it's the marketing agency's responsibility to tell the brand that, hey, one of the gaps you have is your website. So when you're a smaller team, you're more reliant on those leads. You need to close deals almost to keep the lights on in your franchise company. But how have you in the past delegated roles and responsibility to take or to define what the role of that marketing tactic is from the agency or the effort that's happening internally?
So we would define the roles really simply as the marketing team would help with telling the story, and they were responsible for helping us generate additional leads. But then the other side of it, the development team was responsible for taking those leads and developing them into applications and then potential franchisees and candidates.
Sure.
So you have to look at both sides of the equation. It's bringing in quality leads, but having the right team, the right people, having the metrics in place. A lot of franchisors do not have very strong metrics of their awarding process to find out what's happening in the process and where people may be dropping out of the process and not closing. And so not having those metrics in place, you don't know what to fix or find out how good your team is.
So obviously Sean knows what he's talking about. So if you want to know more, connect with him on LinkedIn or send him an email, and you can find it through our sites. We appreciate you watching it if you lasted this long into the weekly Sizzle. Hopefully you got a good amount of information this week, and we will talk to you a week from today. Thanks.
I don't even know You gotta give me something more.
All right, this is probably going in bloopers, and that's the second time Sean took my momentum and ruined it.
Gosh, can't think of their names. Can you edit this? I hope.
That was such a good run.
I know.
I was like, is that gonna be one shot?
My brain just totally shut down on that too.
He just blew it.